Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be The King is Here. It's been a long offseason. I know I take a little bit of a break there with the offseason, but we are back. Wedge 52 Gridiron is back for season 2 of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. Now on Spotify. It has been on Spotify, but now on Apple Podcasts as well as YouTube to make sure you guys can listen to the podcast, whatever is easiest of your convenience. Make sure you tap in, turn in notifications on all of those sites that you use, as well as Instagram and Twitter/X, all at the Wedge 52 Gridiron. This episode, the King is here. That's obviously referring to Derrick Henry signing with the Baltimore Ravens to, further, solidify that dominant rushing offense that Baltimore has come to know since Lamar Jackson was drafted in 2018. This episode of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast is going to start with the Ravens' biggest offseason moves. Then I'm going to have kind of, free-flowing breakdown/thoughts by position group after the 53-man roster was finalized just a couple of days ago. And then I will finish it up with, previewing what's to come for the Wedge 52 Gridiron coming in season 2. So Ravens' biggest offseason moves, obviously signing Derrick Henry, 2-year, $16 million deal for Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens. He'll be joining a already deadly backfield. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, 5,000 something rushing yards in his career already from the quarterback position. Derrick Henry, I believe, is at 9,500 and some change career rushing yards for him. Then obviously, Derrick Henry, top 3 running back, probably top 2 running back in the league. Past couple of years, definitely a top 5 running back of the 2010s and now into the 2020s. So, wild acquisition by the Baltimore Ravens, whose rushing offense has already been top of the league, first in rushing yards per game, 4 out of the 5 last seasons, maybe 5 out of the last 6, something along those lines. It's going to be dangerous rushing attack for the Baltimore Ravens. Opponents to stop, something that opponents already struggled to do against Baltimore since Lamar Jackson took the realm from former quarterback Joe Flacco. And next biggest offseason thing that affected the Baltimore Ravens, Patrick Queen. I was in support of pairing up Patrick Queen with Roquan, that dominant defense, Kyle Hamilton, BK, the rest of that defensive unit. Patrick Queen decided to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Goodbye. I wish the best of health to you, but the worst of luck to you. That's not a good move, PQ. Go do whatever, man. Moving on, Justin Madubuike. Baltimore Ravens used their franchise tag on him and then later extended him on a 4-year, $98 million deal for Justin Madubuike, locking down that center of that defensive line for the Baltimore Ravens last season. I think the contract is a little bit early. I understand you have to make some of these contract moves early. I think it is large, though, for how early it was. And very vocal about that, during the time when this was coming, apparent, when all this was going down, whatever, around the franchise tag deadline, in the following week or so after that, I believe, until he got the extension. I think it's a lot of money. I know he made a huge jump, but before that, he had 8 total sacks his whole career. I want to say that was 3 seasons, and then, maybe 2. I forget right now, but I know he had 8 sacks. Like I said, I'm doing this one fully off the rip. Barely any notes, research, whatever. This just straight from Wedge 52 Gridiron memory. I believe he had 8 sacks in his career, and then to have 13.5 in one season. Very, very large jump. Obviously, that's great for the Ravens. I wish he could do that again. Hopefully he can. And the back end of the unit definitely should help him out with that secondary linebacking crew led by Roquan. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes here. But Justin Madubuike, you know, it's a big jump. It's hard to continue to do that big jump. Last year, I know I retweeted the graphs with the exact numbers, but his double team rates were not that high, in part to the dominant defense behind him, as well as Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy both had 9+ sacks on the season. That definitely takes some pressure off of him. Owe had 5 sacks. That definitely takes pressure off of the interior guys when you got edge rushers that are putting up, good big seasons, sack seasons. On the outside, we can maybe find that kind of success on the outside again this year. BK, not double teamed that much. The graph is on my Twitter. Feel free to check it out there. But his win percentage against double teams, also I want to say was believe that was under 50%. And that was on, lower double team rates than what he's going to be facing this year. You're not, one of the top 5 highest paid defensive tackles. You don't have 13.5 sacks last season and not face double teams heading into, the following year, especially the first half of the season before our edge rush guys are kind of, dominating or, in their groove and we can see what kind of potential they're going to bring and what they can offer off the edge. BK is going to be facing, in my projection, a lot more double teams than he did last year, which, hopefully will help our guys on the outside out a little bit. They can start getting to the quarterback, relieve the pressure off BK by mid-season-ish, kind of create problems for offensive line units. That's obviously things down the road, but BK is going to have to create problems on his own, get off those double teams for that to happen. I hope he does, obviously, for the Ravens. I do like Justin Madubuike. I like his skill set. I just don't necessarily see him. I would like to see more data, more stats on Justin Madubuike to, get a better understanding of what kind of player he's going to be long term before handing out $98 million. I understand you got to do it early. Ravens took a shot. I don't think it's the worst shot. I mean, to be honest, if BK gets 7+ sacks as an interior defensive lineman, that's a good season for BK. That probably means he's taking pressure off of our outside guys, opening up fill lanes for linebackers, etc. So, that's more of along the lines of where I would think, is a realistic year in and year out BK stat line in terms of sacks, 7 to 10 a year, not, 13 and a half, not 10, 11 games in a row like he had. But BK locked in for the next 4 years, will be holding down the middle of the fort. Essentially no movement from the Baltimore Ravens at the wide receiver position. They signed Deontay Hardy. He's mostly going to be a return guy. They re-signed Nelson Aguilar, who I do like as a wide receiver 3/4 ranking, kind of, in that realm. And then they extended Rashad Bateman on a 3-year, $15 million extension. In all honesty, it's kind of good for both sides. Bateman gets a little bit of, money, can, try and show to the Ravens that he still belongs in the NFL, earn some contract maybe after a year or two. He says, hey, I want more money or I want to be traded type of thing. And it also, covers the Ravens up a little bit. If, hey, Bateman doesn't perform again, Bateman can't stay healthy again, it's not a large contract they're going to be facing for years and years on a wide receiver that's no longer producing. So kind of a win-win in terms of the contract, in both the potential, have a cover as well as, potential for bettering. But Rashad Bateman, a lot of this fan base is treating him as a wide receiver 1. This dude has 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns in 3 seasons. That's not productive as an NFL wide receiver, let alone for people to be, thinking that the Baltimore Ravens wide receiver room is perfectly fine. I'll get more into that later in this episode. And then also they drafted Devontae Walker from North Carolina. I want to say that was a 5th round, potentially. And there, he did make the 53-man. Talk about this more later. But that was kind of the movement at the wide receiver position. Not a whole lot going on. I was very vocal about the wide receiver, my thoughts on the wide receiver position and me wanting the Baltimore Ravens to go and attack on either a trade or a free agent signing for a true number one wide receiver to pair up with our already star in the making number one wide receiver Zay Flowers. Potentially, more than biased slightly towards a larger frame, big body number one to pair up with our other number one Zay, who I do think is going to turn be on the edge of being elite after this season. Had a phenomenal rookie year. But Ravens obviously did not make that move in this offseason. And then the third biggest thing was obviously the NFL draft. The Baltimore Ravens drafted Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson, in the first round of that draft back in April. A couple of other picks. Roger Rosengarten, offensive tackle there. And then, Tampa DB, solid defensive back unit. That was kind of, to me, their biggest three picks. Worst pick is I don't know why we're wasting a pick on quarterback. The guy didn't even make the roster. I think we might have signed him back to practice squad, but we didn't need to waste a draft pick on Devin Leary. So that's the Ravens offseason moves, the main moves. And then as well, very late into free agency, I believe it was during training camp even, signing safety Eddie Jackson. So those are the biggest moves by the Baltimore Ravens during this offseason. Now we'll kind of head into my breakdown and thoughts by position. Starting off with the defensive backs, absolutely beautiful unit. I would say potentially it has the potential to be a top 5 secondary unit, obviously led by Kyle Hamilton. Marcus Williams is back and healthy. Kyle Hamilton, heading into year 3, he's shown it last year, and I think he's going to take even more strides. Kid is a natural athlete, finds himself in the right place very frequently, to be able to make plays on that back end of the defense. But Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams is healthy. He's been moving around, flying around at training camp, and this offseason. And then Brandon Stevens, absolutely, played great last season. He's here. He's doing his thing. He's going to be probably starting cornerback alongside Marlon Humphrey, who's been healthy this entire offseason, has been healthy, towards most of the end of last season. Healthy Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Kyle Hampton, and Marcus Williams as the starting 4 defensive back units. That has potential to be very, very locked down. And then not to mention, filling in, in certain packages. We need more DBs, obviously, on the field at sometimes, as well as just rotating guys in. Nate Wiggins, Eddie Jackson, Tampa, we have guys back there. Bo Braid, undrafted free agent from University of Maryland, made the roster, was making plays everywhere during the preseason. I think our secondary unit, obviously a couple more guys to that, our secondary unit can be very, very, very good this season. We will see. I'm hoping, for Marlon's sake, that he, is able to return at least close. Obviously, he's much older than he was when he was first team All-Pro. But Marlon Humphrey, I think, still got it in the tank. His coverage percentage, his defensive back rating last year was much higher than I think some people gave him credit for. I know he missed a little chunk of games in the center there, but Marlon Humphrey played very well last year. I personally am excited to see him back in action as hopefully a full-time starter this season. And then moving to the linebackers, obviously Roquan Smith. If you're a Ravens fan, you're going to think Roquan Smith is the best linebacker in the league. I do believe that. The only other potential suitor would be Fred Warner from San Francisco. Either way you have it, I would say, Roquan Smith is probably better. I think that's just because of, this, besides the stats, Roquan Smith is that leader. He brings that killer mentality that you need to have to lead a defense, especially to lead a defense that historically has had, deadly defenses that no one wants to face. Roquan perfectly embodies the Baltimore Ravens defensive culture and is very vocal about it and very, involving of getting other guys, to believe that way, to play that way, to move that way when attacking the football. And then obviously finding a replacement for Patrick Queen. Probably going to be Trenton Simpson. I know he was drafted out of Clemson 2 years ago. He, had 100 plus snaps. Go listen to episode 2 or 3. I think it's 2 of the Wedge 52 Gridiron. We've made a lot of strides here on the Wedge 52 Gridiron since episode 2. Don't get me wrong, but I do have his snap percentage breakdown at Clemson in there. I believe he played 100 plus snaps at 4 different positions, and I want to say he played 200 some snaps, at this middle linebacker position. So he's most likely going to be the guy. Hopefully he does well. He's going to be alongside one of the greats, Roquan Smith. So, hopefully he learns quick. He is most likely going to be the primary substitute for what Patrick Queen was able to do since Roquan Smith was traded to the Baltimore Ravens from the Chicago Bears a season and a half ago. Other than that, Tavius Robinson is going to be having a bigger role. Odafe Owe, outside linebacker, he's ready to rock. He had 5 sacks, last season. I know, I'm expecting him to be able to continue that kind of projection. I'd be hopeful that maybe Odafe Owe can get 7 or 8 sacks. That would be much needed to kind of take some of that pressure off the interior guys, like I was talking about earlier. David Ojabo seems to be healthy. Hopefully he can get going. This is year 3, I think, for him. He hasn't really played. Ben obviously was hurt when we drafted him with that ACL injury, and then got hurt last year. We did also re-sign Kyle Van Noy on the outside. No true dominant kind of edge rusher, outside linebacker type guy, but we have pieces there that can, we don't need 15, 20 sack kind of guys, with the defensive unit that we have around them. If we can get 2 or 3, 5 to 10 sack guys, that opens up things for Madubuike. That allows Roquan Smith to fly around. That allows, if Hamilton, Humphrey, Stevens, Wiggins, Marcus Williams, all those guys are locking up their defenders, that buys our front 7, more time to get to the quarterback. Like I was saying, it can be a very deadly unit on the defensive side of the ball. I know we have a new defensive coordinator. Mike McDonald went to the Seattle Seahawks head coaching position. And Zachary Orr has filled in now as our defensive coordinator. Former Ravens linebacker, has been around the system, a few years now. Outside of, on the coaching side of football, I'm not worried about Zachary Orr. I know he has a good relationship with Coach Harbaugh. He's got playmakers. He's got deadly pieces. Roquan, Kyle Hamilton, etc. Baltimore fans, you already know what's going on. Not worried about the defense, to be honest. I would not be surprised if we're a top 3 unit again on the defensive side of the ball. And then defensive line, obviously Justin Madubuike holding it down. Michael Pierce, a couple of other guys. And we got Jones in the inside, I want to say. Again, just freestyle here. I know there's another guy I'm missing. Re-signed Brent Urban. Defense line, interior guys. Very good unit. Defense, I would say A, for the defensive unit heading into the season. Now moving to the offensive side of the ball. Quarterback position, 2-time MVP, 99 out of 100 votes. Most dynamic quarterback the league's ever seen. What else? Yeah, Lamar Jackson. In terms of backups, if Lamar Jackson goes down, we're going to need to find a better backup than Josh Johnson. No disrespect to him, but if Lamar goes down, we got bigger issues than that. Been healthy, not concerned with it. That's football. Things do happen. We're prepared for the best case scenario. And if something happens, we go out, find a backup quarterback. Not really concerned right now to be filling our roster spots with backup quarterback. What if, when we have a top 2 quarterback in the league, you go with that, you do what you can, and you move forward. Running back position, obviously the king is here. Derrick Henry, top 2 running back in the league, probably best true running back. Obviously McCaffrey, who's most of y'all probably know, he's probably the best running back in the league. But in terms of true running back, I would say it's probably Derrick Henry. McCaffrey's a little more versatile, a lot more, usage in the receiving game over there in San Fran for McCaffrey. But Derrick Henry, freaking beast. Now in the black and purple. A lot of Ravens fans have been waiting. for this moment since Derrick Henry got shut down by that Ravens defense in the playoffs a couple years ago. So Derrick Henry is going to be leading the way on that. And then behind him, we have Justice Hill. Um, he's been a solid RB3, since he's been here with the Baltimore Ravens. And then Keaton Mitchell, starting the season on PUP list, so he will miss the first 4 games, but he will be back. Keaton Mitchell, I want to say, was first or second in explosive plays last year. I believe explosive play for rushing, I want to say, is 15 plus yard carries or 20 plus yard carries. I want to say he was first in the league, maybe second, for sure top 5. I want to say the only players ahead of him was maybe, and obviously based on usage too, a couple of these guys are used way more. But I want to say only Devin Achane and potentially CMC were ahead of Keaton Mitchell. Again, I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but I know his explosive play percentage and his number of explosive plays was through the roof. Very elusive running back in Keaton Mitchell. Hopefully he's back sooner than later. It will be at least week 5 before we see him taking snaps in the backfield on Sundays or Thursdays, whatever. And then moving to the tight end position, best tight end unit in the NFL. Mark Andrews is back, healthy, ready to go. Make up for some lost time last season dealing with that injury. And then Isaiah Likely really showed out last year in Mark Andrews' absence. Played above my expectations, in projections for him. So that was good to see. Him and Lamar have gotten, good chemistry. There was really no, window of learning the chemistry. Likely kind of hopped in, was one of Lamar's top targets, right away. So that's definitely good to see. Hopefully a lot of sets that Todd Monken runs, going to have 2 tight ends on the field at a time, in part because we have 2 great tight end weapons, that we should have on the field as much as possible in Andrews and Likely. But also I wouldn't be surprised, Likely I think has potential and has, close to the speed to be kind of that big body wide receiver, to kind of fill in as a wide receiver in our, to be honest, outside of Zay Flowers, very lackluster wide receiver room. Zay, obviously I've been rooting for him, been, talking positive of Zay his whole career. I think he truly has potential to be the next elite wide receiver, top 10 kind of guy. And hopefully we see those progressions this year, but he can't do it all, by himself. So I would not be surprised. And I would, hopefully we are all seeing, Andrews line up more traditional, either short split, standing up, or in that 3-point stance on the line from Mark Andrews, potentially Isaiah Likely split and Zay Flowers split with another wide receiver, as well as Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the backfield. It's a good looking, offense spread. We are going to need some wide receivers to step up. Third tight end, obviously, Charlie Kohler. Does the dirty work, blocks well for that, is that tight end 3 spot. Moving on to the offensive line. A little bit of a rebuild on the offensive line, which I think is okay. At some point, you're going to have to do it. I think we have solid pieces, tons of potential in that projected started offensive line as we head into Kansas City next week. But they are a little bit younger, a little bit lower in experience, except for Ronnie Stanley. He's projected to start at left tackle. Ronnie Stanley looked like, he started to become the Ronnie Stanley we used to know, those last 6-7 games of the season. So hopefully he's, got his legs back under him, had a healthy offseason, and is ready to go and continue that trend of being like the old Ronnie Stanley. And then projected at left guard, Andrew Voorhees, 7th round pick out of USC. Last season was unable to play because of that torn ACL in the NFL Combine, but he did set the bench record for linemen in his Combine class, not all time, but number 1 lineman in bench reps at the Combine 2 years ago with a torn ACL. He's projected to start at left guard. Tyler Linderbaum, obviously we know he's starting at center, dealing with a little bit of a health thing. I think he'll be good to go from what I've seen. I want to say it was his groin, maybe his ankle. I know it was a leg injury. I think Coach Harbaugh, the Ravens training staff, Tyler Linderbaum, was all taking, extra precautions, for this case. They wanted him to be healthy, ready to go week one, rather than playing in preseason action. Then at the right guard position, probably the biggest question mark. I would say maybe the biggest, or most likely projected right guard starting week one is Daniel Falele. You know, had his good moments, had his bad moments in preseason, as well as some of the other offensive linemen that got more snaps in preseason. A lot of evaluating to go at a couple positions, primarily the two guard spots for that offensive unit. I would guess. My guess is Falele gets the week one start at right guard, and then right tackle. Looks like Roger Rosengarten may be in line to get that first start at right tackle as a rookie. Played solid in preseason. Obviously, a very young unit. Young guys. Linderbaum, third season. Falele, I want to say maybe third season as well. But he hasn't been starting like Linderbaum has his first 2 years. And then, Ronnie, whatever, ninth year in the league, maybe for him. I want to say it was 2017 rookie, if I'm not mistaken. So, besides Stanley, a young unit, a lot of potential. We've already seen Linderbaum's capabilities. He's already up there, top 5 center in the league. Voorhees was going to be a first or second round pick. We got Rosengarten second round. Like, the potential is there. There's going to probably be some ups and downs at times, but I do think the offensive line unit has the capabilities to succeed. We have a couple of solid backups. Ben Cleveland, Patrick McCarry, and Salah. Those three guys can kind of rotate in at those guard spots. McCarry's played some tackle. I think Cleveland's played just a little bit of tackle. He's played center. Salah's played both guards. He played tackle in college. I think we can get there with the offensive line. It may be rough to start at times, but I think we can get there. Especially with the addition of Derrick Henry, and Lamar Jackson now. Potentially two of the scariest people to see in the backfield. Lamar, hands down to me, scariest quarterback to defend. Derrick Henry, while not shifty, not the shiftiest, shifty, like he will straight up just run you over and then do it the next play and then get 20 yards after he runs you over. So potentially the scariest backfield in the league will help that offensive line unit, I think, more than most people may think. Obviously, scary, but if that's just a half second hesitation from defensive lineman versus an offensive lineman who knows what he's doing, wants to attack, that could benefit in our favor greatly. We will see how it works out here. Then the last position group, wide receiver. Obviously, wide receiver one, Zay Flowers. He is elite. That's my guy. I believe in Zay. I think we all saw it last year. I know I've been calling it since early training camp last year. I think Zay Flowers is going to be great. I've said that several times in this episode. I'm sure I will say that several times this season. Zay Flowers heading into year two, counting playoffs. I think he had 1,100-ish yards. I want to say 8 touchdowns, maybe 7 receiving, 1 rushing. Counting the playoffs, something like that. 1,108-ish as a rookie wide receiver. That's good numbers. I'm excited for year two, Zay. After that, the wide receiver room is dismal. Rashad Bateman, he straight up, he needs to produce. 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns is not cutting it heading into your 4th year. I want him to produce for his sake. I don't want to see someone, fail at what they're trying to do. I also want him to produce for the Baltimore Ravens' sake. Obviously, the end goal is to end up in New Orleans. It's a long way from here. We got to go one game at a time. But we need Rashad Bateman to produce. We need Rashad Bateman to stay healthy. If we want any shot, true shot at getting there, we need Bateman to do, increase his productivity. If Bateman as wide receiver 2 can get 700 yards and 5 touchdowns this season, I will be happy with that result from Bateman. And being healthy, that's 14, 15 out of 17 games. Preferably 15 plus out of 17 games for Rashad Bateman. 705. I think that's a reasonable number where he can get, obtain that number if he stays on the field. I don't think he's a horrible wide receiver. I just think, he's been dealing with injuries. He's been on a crowded roster. A lot of times he's open. I mean, me personally, I think a lot of those times where he's open is because we have all these other weapons. We have, you know, Zay Flowers, we have Mark Andrews, we had Isaiah Likely, we have OBJ, who, yes, it's towards the end of his career. OBJ still draws eyes. He's still one of the best wide receivers that's been in the league since 2014, despite all of his injuries. And yes, we have Lamar Jackson. Those all draw eyes. So hopefully Bateman figures it out for the Ravens' sake, for his sake, and for our quest to end up in New Orleans after Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, and Tylan Wallace. I'd probably say our 3-4 spots. I'm solid with both those guys at 3-4. Whatever, interchangeable in my opinion between those two, 3 and 4. Versus Aguilar versus Wallace. I mean it's fine as 3-4 spots. It'd be nice if they were 4 or 5 spots, but Ravens haven't made an effort to get in there and improve the wide receiver room. With a true dominant signing. OBJ I think was the closest we got to it, and he had 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. Obviously good leader, but that's truly the closest we've gotten to a true two dominant receivers. We had Marquise Brown, who was getting into that, potentially into that top 15 conversation of wide receivers. Then we traded him, and then now we have Zay, who I think can get into that top 15 wide receiver conversation, this season. He's probably already, close, probably in that 15 to low 20s range. Haven't made a list, obviously, but, I think he can get there. But it would be so sweet to have 2 top 20, 2 top 16, 2 top 17 wide receivers in Ravens uniforms at the same time. And then Deontay Hardy, we signed him. I would project he's primarily going to be a receiver, returner, excuse me. Not sure how many snaps he's going to see as a receiver. Probably a couple a game, but I think our main reason for signing him was to be a returner, especially with this new, kickoff format, which is odd. I admittedly need to study up on the rules of it and the finite like technicalities of this kickoff rule. But I know you need 2 returners back there. I would project Hardy's going to take, be most useful for the Ravens as a return man. And then Devontae Walker, obviously drafted him from North Carolina. He did make the 53 man. From what I've seen, he's been struggling just a little bit in training camp with certain things, catching the ball. Primarily that's wide receiver's main job as well. Not really something struggle with, but made the 53. We'll see what he can do. He's a little bit bigger framed wide receiver, so it'd be nice if he could figure it out too. Obviously, me personally, wedge 52 gridiron here. I do think wide receiver is our biggest area of concern. I know we do have Zay Flowers, and I know there's maybe 3 or 4 receivers on the field versus 5 offensive linemen. But to me, I think wide receiver is the biggest concern for the Baltimore Ravens. The drop off after wide receiver 1, Zay Flowers, in my opinion, is just too large, and should be improved in the wide receiver core. So that is kind of my breakdown and just thoughts, on the fly thoughts of each position group and kind of where they stand heading into this season. Baltimore Ravens start this season next Thursday, September 5th, at Kansas City. The NFL season kickoff game, Ravens versus Chiefs. It's a rematch of the AFC Championship last season. Probably, the biggest game out of the 3. The 2 championships in the Super Bowl. Probably the biggest game. Probably had the most eyes on it. The most, most people engaged in that game. It'd be my opinion. Baltimore Ravens last year, the Super Bowl should have been theirs. It's a new season. They didn't show up, when they needed to against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, they should have dominated. we didn't have the best game plan. We made a few errors. Had a few calls that didn't go our way. It is what it is. It's over. We dominated the Lions, dominated the 49ers. Everyone, the whole country, every football fan, NFL fans saw that. So it is disappointing. But as Lamar Jackson was saying, he's hungry. The rest of the league is hungry. The critics are certainly hungry to put us down again, to put Lamar Jackson down again, and going against the two-time defending champs who are trying to, go three-peat, something no NFL team has ever done in three-peat. So what a great game to kick off the NFL season. Ravens versus Chiefs, obviously. Week 1, first game. It's not the final evolution of either of these teams, which would be kind of cool to see. How this game would be different week 1 versus like week 10 maybe. But chances are Ravens and Chiefs will play each other again this season. I'll have a full in-depth preview of the Ravens at Chiefs NFL kickoff coming out next week. That'll most likely come out next Wednesday. Please press the follow button, subscribe button, turn on the notifications wherever you're listening to this, wherever you can view this. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter/X. As I dive into the second season of the Wedge 52 Gridiron, I plan on producing more content this year than last. Like I said, Ravens Chiefs, season kickoff full game preview will come out next Wednesday. Potentially 1 or 2 other episodes coming out before that. So only way to stay up to date on everything Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast is to follow me on all platforms. And before we sign off, make sure you remember, go Ravens.